Starting with just a little bit of water, and as before, we're going to make some diluted ink in the water. Just by dropping some ink into the water. Not real dark. For this assignment, for this exercise rather, I'm going to divide the page right down the middle. We're going to do two figures, one on the left and one on the right. Let's start. I've got two brushes. You can do this with one brush, but I'm just going to use two brushes. I've got this larger brush. It'll help me get through the mass of the figure a lot faster than the smaller brush, and I'll make a transition to the smaller brush. So for this assignment, rather for this exercise, we're going to do the figure as before with diluted ink. But rather than just having the figure floating in the middle of space, we're going to focus on how the figure fits in space, not outer space, but just the surroundings. So things like the couch and whatever I can see in the background are going to become important parts of this figure study. So I'm even going to start doing some of that now. I'm not going to go all the way to the edge. Don't go all the way to the edge of the page. It's more important to keep a border there. Let's shift to some black ink here, just concentrated, and work with lines. You could use a pen, especially if you had, say, a dip pen. Works really well with India ink. But if you don't have one of those and you want to use some pen for some fine quality work, you could get like a micron pen or even a Sharpie, fine Sharpie marker. You could use even a ballpoint pen would do the trick, but only when things have dried, and so you have to be kind of careful about that. Right now the weather is really dry, middle of winter, so things are drying off fairly quick. I'm still getting some wet into wet, and that's fine. The idea here is still to go quick, not get too caught up in the details, just get the gesture in. You know, I might, for the hair, I might dilute the ink just a little bit more. So it's not quite as dark. So I've got full ink on my brush, and then I'm just dipping it in the water just to make it a little bit less dark. Nearly there. Just a few more minutes here. A little bit of contour, cross contour. Working on the hands now. Nice thing about using a brush is that you really don't have a way to have to stop and fix mistakes. You just got to keep drawing. Get that little remote control in here. Just let go of all prohibition, or inhibition rather, and just draw. Draw quick, get in the zone. Be okay if you make mistakes, just keep drawing, focusing on observation and line quality and handling the material. Very interesting to use this ink and a brush. Always make sure you're looking forward. Don't fixate too much on the drawing without checking what you're doing, or what you're looking at rather. You should be doing this from a live model. Someone to pose for you. If you're having a hard time finding people to pose, find a classmate who's also having a hard time finding people to pose. You guys can work together, take turns. We might pull just a little bit of water in here to dilute this down and give it just a little bit of value study there. All right. Now we're on the socks. Trying to avoid getting too caught up in the color of that and just looking at the value, how it all works. Undiluted ink there. Give some gravity. And now we are going to move on to the background. Here on the couch. Notice I'm using another dilution of ink, just a little bit more ink compared to water. There's a certain point where I can also kind of dry brush. Might leave a little white outline in a place where two shapes meet, like where this couch meets the leg, just to give it some contrast, even though there's already some contrast there. Take a little bit of concentrated ink here. We'll put the little foot. It's holding up the couch. Here, and we're also going to put some wet into wet right through here. There's another big shadow right under there, and then some more diluted ink going up from there in this negative space where we can see the other part of the sectional there. Now let's get some really diluted ink. We're going to come up this edge here. Some pretty good shadows underneath. So I'm dipping into the ink and then just diluting it a little bit with some of the water. Nice shadow right there. Another one kind of back here. A gradient coming out. Do some wetted to wet. This seems just a little darker than what I've gotten here on this edge of the couch. Streaks of hair coming down here. And then in the background, you can see into the kitchen, and there's kind of dark cabinetry kind of framing the head. About right there. We're going to kind of simplify it a little bit. And then use some diluted ink. Just to kind of get some of these abstract shapes in place. Indicate that we've got some cabinets back there. The window right here. A little picture frame over here. Calendar. I see a fridge coming about right here. Almost there. And then another wall. There's a light switch. Alright, last few touches here. Let's go in with just a few marks through on the couch here, things like this wrinkle, and the seam between the upper cushion. There's another wrinkle coming down here. And we'll probably take some water, soften some of this up.